Hi, my name is Dana Clay, and I'm a contract trainer with PowerDMS. I'm also a current accreditation manager. I've been serving in that capacity for more than 17 years with a law enforcement agency in North Carolina. I'm excited to be here with you today to deliver the second in a three-part series of courses here at the CLIA conference on how to utilize your PowerDMS application to successfully manage your accreditation process. So we're going to start by looking at a couple PowerPoint slides that are going to cover our training objectives for today. You should be able to see that on your screen now. As I mentioned, this is the second in a three-part series of courses. This one's entitled Managing Your Accreditation Process. And the objective of these three courses are really just to introduce you to the PowerDMS Standards Assessment Tool and explain how that can be utilized to effectively manage your accreditation process. The topics that are going to be covered in this particular course include the following: adding assignments and assigning roles, also creating tasks, adding attachments within your assessment, adding highlights, setting statuses of individual standards or updating them in bulk, and lastly, updating a flagged PowerDMS attachment. If you joined us in part one, or you're going to look at that section later, that was entitled Getting Started with Your Accreditation Process, and it covered the following topics: adding a new user group, requesting membership to the CLIA community and subscribing to your standards manual, also setting security for the standards manual, viewing, searching, and comparing versions of the standards manual, as well as using your manual to create an assessment. Finally, knowing how to set statuses in bulk and utilizing the alert feature in PowerDMS to notify you when you have pending items. If you intend to attend our part three, which is finalizing your assessment, then we will be covering upgrading your assessment from one version of the standards manual to another, also creating a mock CSM or final assessor role and assigning those with the appropriate rights within your assessment, running reports related to standards, which includes utilizing CLIA's 20% calculator, also closing out an assessment, locating a closed assessment once it's been archived, copying attachments and tasks from your closed assessment to your new assessment. When we conclude these courses at the conference, we hope that you'll also hold on to the PowerPoint presentation that you're provided, as well as explore some of the other resources that are available for you under our help menu in your PowerDMS site. That includes both the PowerDMS Success Community and PowerDMS University. You will find a wealth of knowledge-based articles, video tutorials, also recorded webinars and how-to guides, as well as specific resources related to CLIA, such as the Best Practices Guide. You'll also find self-paced tutorials and boot camps that are available for you in university. So check those out. As I mentioned, I hope you'll hold on to this PowerPoint presentation as well, because you'll notice that each of the topics that we cover have an embedded link associated with them that links you back to one of those resources in our success community. So make sure that you hold on to this guide and place it somewhere convenient so that you can always refresh on the learning that's been provided. Okay. We are going to transition now into our live site within PowerDMS. You should see that on your screen now. Now, if you attended section one of this, then you'll remember that what we did was create an assessment already from our standards manual we selected. In that case, we selected the Law Enforcement Standards Manual. However, whether you're with Training Academy, Campus Law Enforcement, or Communications, all of the functionality in PowerDMS works the same way with respect to creating an assessment and navigating within that. So just keep that in mind as we use the examples that I've set out today. So we're going to begin by looking at our assessment from our blue menu bar. You'll notice over to the far left, I can see the assessment option, and when I expand on that, I will see the CALIA Law Enforcement Standards Assessment as I titled it in my PowerDMS site. I will also tell you that if you have any pending tasks, then you will also see those in your to-do menu from your main page in your PowerDMS site. Whether those tasks are the original default task assigned, the set status task, or whether you've made specific tasks in there. If there is something pending, you would be able to see it from the to-do menu, and you could access either the task specifically or the assessment as a whole. You can also navigate to your inbox and standards, and you can access it that way as well. So several different options. We're going to begin by navigating through our assessment utilizing this blue menu bar. When I expand on that, one of the things that you'll hear me often reference to is the root of our manual. That will be where you see the actual title of your assessment as you named it when you first created the assessment. When I select that option, it will bring up the assessment for me in my main menu view here. You'll know that you're not in the standards manual, but instead of the assessment in a couple ways. One is that you will see a third column over here to the right side, which is going to provide for you the various roles that you can utilize in your assessment, as well as the status bar associated with each role, which will give you a quick glance at where your statuses have been set, how you're progressing in your assessment towards meeting compliance. If you hover over any of those status bars, it'll provide a breakdown for you of the various statuses per standard. So the first thing that we're going to look at is how we can make some assignments within our assessment based on our needs within our organization. Now, when we first created this assessment, the only assignment that's already been made is the assignment to the individual that created the assessment. When they were logged in by name, which of course you could see the person who's logged in by name up in the top right corner, they had the ability to specify the role that they were assuming. In most cases, we suggest that that's always the accreditation manager who creates the assessment by best practice. And by default, that accreditation manager role who will then be given participate rights within your assessment. Now, as another best practice, we do suggest that you create groups as you make assignments within your assessment. And to begin with, I do encourage you to do that with the accreditation manager role. Even if you are only a one man or one woman kind of role within the accreditation process, it's still recommended that you do that, and I'll explain why. By creating a group, and you'll see these groups provided for me under a parent title of CALIA conference groups. I've got several here that I've created already, and we discussed creating groups in our first course, but accreditation manager specifically, by utilizing that group, it gives you the flexibility to be able to transition individuals into that role should the need arise to change who your accreditation manager is, and to do that pretty seamlessly without having to go into the actual assessment to add or remove individual names. So that's the recommendation for any of your assignments that you make, is that you do it through a group. So although we're not going to cover how you can create a new group in the system again, do know you can always reference back to course number 1 to be able to see how to complete that task. Now, I am going to show you how to add in the accreditation manager group title. You would do that by under your assignment at the root level. And once again, the root is at the very top. You can also see this by about midway down our pane bar here. You'll see 3-dot menu, and you can expand that so that you can also see another navigation pane here for you. And if you click on CALIA Law Enforcement up at the top, once again, that's considered the root of our menu. So you want to make sure you're at the root and under the assignment tab. Now, just for some ease of navigation, I'm also going to unpin our blue menu bar so that it'll kind of go away and provide us a little bit more room to navigate. And you'll notice here that I have the option to add a new assignment. So when I select Add New Assignment, I'm going to select the group that I'm searching for, and all of them are under that parent group of CALIA Conference, so that's why I'm searching by that. I will then select the Accreditation Manager group that I've created and place that group in the role of Accreditation Manager with participate rights and select Save. Now, in doing so, what I did is basically duplicate the rights that's already there, because the individual who's in this Accreditation Manager group, as you saw when I first selected it, is the admin role. So basically what you see now is a duplicate effort. However, if at any time I, as the admin, left this role, or perhaps I was on extended leave, or maybe there was somebody else that needed to be added in addition to me to the Accreditation Manager role, the only thing you would need to do is go to the group and manage it and add in the additional member or take the other member out. You would not need to go into the assessment and actually change out roles and responsibilities. Instead, your group titles would always stay in here and it would remain clean and consistent for you. Now, the other thing you need to consider while you're at the root of your manual is who else is in your process that will be assisting you as you move forward. For example, do you have an accreditation team? And who does that team consist of? Do you also utilize other members of your staff, such as program managers or other staff assigned personnel that have the responsibility of providing you with compliance documents, but perhaps do not participate actively in the assessment itself? You might consider those people to be what's known as auxiliary. Now, you can utilize either one of these roles basically interchangeably, but that gives you the flexibility to specify the difference between people who may be on a full-time or part-time team with you focused on accreditation versus people that are in your organization that are providing you with compliance documents. However, they don't actually navigate within the accreditation assessment itself. So I'm going to explain both of those roles. I will tell you that if you've got a team that's going to be loading things such as like policies or other documentation, and they should have the right to access any of the chapters, subchapters, or standards, you would want to assign them at your root. So that's what I'm going to do here with my team, is I'm going to search for that team group that I've created. Once again, I'm using CALIA Conference because I've already created them under that parent group, and assign my team. I'm going to place them in the role of team with participate rights. Now keep in mind that participate gives anyone who's in that group the ability to add attachments, to set statuses, and to create tasks, but only in that role, which means that when they load those attachments or when they set those statuses, it's doing so as a team member, not as the manager. So it still gives you as the manager the ability to edit that or override that so that you've got the approval capability in the site. Now, to ensure that that happens, you need to make sure that you are part of that team role as well. Any role that you give out to someone in your site, whether you decide to use the accreditation team or whether you decide to use both team and auxiliary, the manager would need to be a part of that as well so that they have the ability to edit that. So you'll notice under my team here, let me collapse the manager role and show you the team. I am a member of the team. I also have several other people in here as well that are included. A couple of them being like employees that perhaps are assisting me with loading policy. Another might be a supervisor, which may just want to have the oversight to be able to look at what your current status of your assessment is or what's contained therein, just to check checks and balances. So you've got the ability to add as few or as many individuals into a group role as you need to be. But instead of having to add those users one by one into my assessment by name and it getting very bogged down and kind of messy, instead I've just got the actual group attached with all of those individuals as part of that group. Now, you'll also need to ensure that you add that group again if you want them to have the capability to be able to see what's in the Accreditation Manager role. So once again, I would scroll down, I would select my team, and this time I would place them in the role of manager, but with observe rights. That will then give the team members, everybody who appears in that group, the ability to see what the manager has loaded or what the manager has already approved and moved into the manager's role, so that they can still see it's there, but they can no longer edit it themselves. It basically locks it down and secures it from being modified. Okay. Now, if I chose to utilize an auxiliary role, this allows you to kind of drill down even more into where you want people to be assigned. For example, I could assign a recruitment manager. I could assign a communications supervisor. I could assign a canine supervisor or coordinator to have access to only the chapter, subchapter, or even a standard that they need to see. In that case, once again, you would want to create a group. As you can see, I've got several of those here. My canine supervisor, my recruitment manager, a training manager, communication supervisor, someone like that that has responsibility to provide me with proofs that I might want them to be able to see the standards that they have to comply with and see the attachments associated with that standard, but not be allowed to see every other standard within my assessment. That will ensure that it protects the integrity of the documents that are contained therein and the privacy of those, so that those individuals don't see human resource related documents or internal affairs documents or things that are more sensitive in nature. It'll restrict them to only those standards that they need to have access to. So I've created those groups, and we are going to walk through assigning one of those now. We'll scroll down here to chapter 31, which is our recruitment and selection. And I am going to add my group at this level, only to that chapter. So I would select Add New Assignment. Once again, I'm going to search for my group under my CALIA conference groups that I've created, looking for recruitment manager this time. There it is. And place that group in the role of auxiliary with participate rights. Once again, you could use team here as well if you wanted to. It doesn't matter which one of those terms you choose to utilize, unless, of course, you wanted to specify the difference between your team and the auxiliary members and they're participating in your assessment. So I'm going to select Save. I'm also going to give this recruitment manager those same rights that I discussed before, which is I am going to provide them with the ability to observe the accreditation manager role. So once again, the role would be accreditation manager and observe. So that takes care of that. Now, the only thing that I have not done is that my manager is not in each and every one of these groups that I've created. Okay, so when I show you all the groups out to the side, communications and evidence and canine, I did not put admin in each of those, because instead of having to add them to each of those sites, what I could do instead is add them at the root level, once again, of my assessment. So under my assignment tab, I would need to go and add in an entry for my accreditation manager. And once again, this would be under my CALIA conference parent folders. I'm going to select Accreditation Manager, and I'm going to place that user and that group into the role of auxiliary with participate rights. And once again, why I do that is so that my Accreditation Manager or anybody who's in that group would have the ability to edit the content that's been provided by any auxiliary. So your Accreditation Manager can participate as each role, but your team members and your auxiliary members only have the ability to observe the manager. That means that the manager would then have the overall capability to approve or deny what moves into that final Accreditation Manager file. Okay. Now from there, I have already made some assignments in some of my other chapters for these groups as well. And they operate all the same way. For example, if I scroll down to chapter 84 under property and evidence, you'll notice that I put my evidence custodian there. Participate rights as an auxiliary, and once again, the ability to observe the Accreditation Manager role. Notice that the pencil icon appears whenever you attach them at a particular chapter, which means that they operate within that chapter. They do not, however, operate within another. So for example, if I were to go to public information, you're not going to see the evidence custodian having the access to chapter 54, public information. Okay, so it keeps their access restricted to only those standards that they need to see. All right, moving on, we're going to talk about how we can add in tasks. Now, if you first noticed when you came into your assessment, when you created it, you've got tasks in there that specifically say that you need a status for this standard. And that is a default task that's set up whenever you add a new role to your assessment. So as you can see, when the fact that we put in a team member and we put in an auxiliary role, it's going to assign those standards with those need statuses. Now we set the ones for Accreditation Manager in course 1, and we did this in bulk. And we did so that we could clear out our inbox so that it wasn't flooded with a bunch of tasks that basically didn't have specifics to them. Now, there's 3 different ways to look at tasks. If this is the way that works best for you, especially if you have just an Accreditation Manager role at your department, maybe there's only one of you overseeing this process, and you want to keep all of the standards in your inbox with that set or need status capability, you can certainly navigate it that way. However, you can see, of course, those other ones for auxiliary just dropped in. Now I've got 922 different standards in there. This would get very burdensome and cumbersome if you are using the full suite of PowerDMS and perhaps managing signing off on documents and completing courses. You'll want to try to keep that inbox clear as much as you can so that what you see is in fact true task you have to manage. So there's another way to deal with this, and that is to set these statuses in bulk rather than setting them at the individual standard level. Every standard does have a status tab where you can go and make a change to any of these statuses, moving them to in compliance or perhaps not applicable or not in compliance. However, you can also do this in bulk. So I am going to show you that process by, once again, at the root of your manual, you would click on your Standards tab, and you would select the role that you're operating in. So we've already set our Accreditation Manager statuses. What we want to do is go ahead and set them for our team. And I'm going to do one as an advanced accreditation and one as a tier 1, just to demonstrate the 2 different ways depending on what your organization is complying with. So let's do our team role first. In this team role, I'm going to set the status. I'm going to set the status. In this case, you have an option again. You could set your statuses to all in progress and then back out the ones that are not applicable to you. You could also choose to set them not in compliance if you choose to use that, and then of course move them towards compliance, whichever one of those two options is better. I'm going to use in compliance. It seems to be the kinder, gentler kind of status, and so in this case I want to move my standards in progress, and I'm going to say that we're working with them. They're in progress for this first year. So I'm going to set that expiration date to expire the first day of year 2. So we created our assessment on 10/1 of 2020. Year 2 will begin on 10/1 of 2021. So I will check this top box and apply this status to all of our standards, and then drop down to the bottom of the page, and you can see that's moving 459 standards into that status, and I select save. That will then update our status bar over here to the side. Now from there, if you have a chapter or some standards that you do not comply with, you can then move those by selecting the chapter. For example, let's say that we did not have court security at our organization. So once again, I want to make sure I'm under my role. I'm going to select set status. This time I'm going to set the status to not applicable. I'm going to remove the expiration because if it's not applicable in year 1, typically it is not applicable throughout our entire cycle, unless of course your facilities change or perhaps a practice or procedure changes and you have to come in compliance. Otherwise, it would be not applicable throughout. I'm going to check my top box and apply. Notice that it overwrites the statuses that were already there as well as the expiration date. I'm going to drop down and select save. It's only changing those 30 standards in that chapter, and it updates our status bar in that chapter. If I were to go back and look at my root, now you can see that my team has 30 that are not applicable, and the remaining 429 standards are in fact in progress and underway. Now you can do that for as many chapters or standards that you need. You can back them out and move them to a different status. And you can still do that in bulk. I'm going to do the same process for the auxiliary role. However, I am going to demonstrate that as if it were a tier 1 organization. So what's different about this is that we would set the status in this case to not applicable for all the standards. Okay, and not put a date in, and apply, drop down to the bottom, click save. Since the majority of standards in a tier 1 do not apply to the organization, we're going to do not applicable first, and then we're going to go back to the top and use our filter tool here, which says standard contains. We're going to enter in LE1, which allows us to filter those standards that only contain the LE1 acronym. And then we're going to select set status, set our status to in progress, or once again, not in compliance if you choose to use that. Put your date if you choose to use that they will remain in progress until 10 of 2021. And check the top box and apply. Drops that in, save it at the bottom, and it's only updating those 181 standards that are part of tier 1. So now you can see how that status bar would look. 278 are not applicable to our organization. The other 181 LE1 standards are. Okay. So that's looking at setting those statuses in bulk. Now, that will bring you down in your inbox to only any standards that have been set with some other specification. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. First, you could consider setting statuses in bulk but with something a little bit more specific than that needs status default. And to do that, I am going to look at chapter 2. So let's say that, and the only reason I'm selecting chapter 2 is because it is only 4 standards. So I want to show you how I could set all 4 standards in bulk. I could do that by, once again, still under this Standards tab. I would select here Set Status, and this time I'm going to do it from the Accreditation Manager role, okay? Because typically it might be your Accreditation Manager that wants to keep track of whether there is in fact a proof in the file for that compliance year. They might be the one that's doing the double check to make sure it's all ready to go. So to do so, I would select Perform Action. This time I'm going to add a task. I'm going to put my task as being need a 2020 proof. Now you could utilize the terminology year 1, year 2, year 3, so forth. That might be the way you've done it up until this point. Check out your best practices guide. That has been something modified, especially now with the introduction of the perpetual accreditation. You might find that it's easier to utilize the year terminology. So I need a 2020 proof, and this date is not when that is due, but instead when you want this task to begin appearing in the inbox. Typically, you want that to be consistent with when that cycle year kicks off. So my 2020 proof starts becoming due on the first day of that year. So 10/1 of 2020 was when this year kicked off. So I want my task to pop in the box so that it's available immediately. I then check off the standards that I want it to apply to, and I select Add Task to those standards and click Save. Now, if I were to go to my inbox and select standards, you're going to see that if I hover over that, this is the way it would look when your user came into the inbox, whether it's the accreditation manager or someone else that you've assigned that to. At least it tells them now that you need a 2020 proof for this particular standard. Okay, so that might be one option you want to consider, is that while I do want to use task, I still want to remain somewhat generic and maybe only specify by the year that I need the compliance document for. And that's certainly another option. The third option is you can get much more granular, such as the ones you'll see here, where you could actually specify the role and the item that is required from that particular person. So to do so, let's just take a look at that standard and show you. You can actually specify anything in this task field that you want to report on. So you'll notice in this case, I've put in terminology such as recruitment manager is the person that I'm going to need this task from. And what I need is a copy of the annual analysis of the recruitment plan. So a couple suggestions for your task is that you consider who it is that you're requesting this from, because you can run, once again, a report based on, I only want to search for the tasks that are in the system for the recruitment manager. And that would allow you to generate a report that would bring back all the tasks for that role. The second thing is you could add in a time-sensitive element such as annual, semi-annual, quarterly, so that once again you could run a report from your standards manual of any tasks that are pending that have the word annual in it or quarterly, so that you could generate those time-sensitive tasks. So to create one of those, let me go and pull up one of our standards here again. And I will utilize 3131, which is a job announcement. So to create a task, you would select New Task. Once again, you would put in the date here of the task of when you want it to drop into the inbox for your user. You could put in that terminology, just like I mentioned before, about the title of the person. Once again, don't use, just as a best practice, don't use people's name, but instead utilize their position title so that as people transition, it will stay consistent. And then you could say something like need current copy of job posting. Okay, this one's asking for job announcements. So you're basically giving that role, that person in that position, the heads up that you need a copy of this for compliance for this standard. Now you have a couple options down here at the bottom. If you are using either a team or an auxiliary role, you have the ability as manager to assign it out to one of those two. I would want this one to go to my auxiliary since my recruitment manager is in that role in my assessment. You can't assign it to a specific person, but by the fact that I've assigned my group to Chapter 31, then anybody in that group who's in the auxiliary role will receive it in their inbox. This is a way to ensure that your evidence custodian doesn't get recruitment manager task, okay? I also can make this recurring. By selecting recurring, it wants you to identify the cycle you want this task to appear on. So if I know I need a job posting for every year, I could select one and put the year down. You could use, of course, months, days. There's all different options there, but you want one of these for each year of your cycle. And notice that this date populated automatically in that field. That comes from our date that we specified when we first created our assessment. We had a start and an end date, and the end date was set for the first day of the last year, meaning that's when year 4 begins. Now, if you're under a 3-year process because you're in self-assessment, you can of course change that. So I will select save, and notice what happens is that it automatically generates the 4 tasks for me here, one of which is current because it's underway right now, beginning 10/1. And then the others that are upcoming that will drop into the inbox on subsequent years, 2021, 22, and 23 for year 2, 3, and 4. Okay. As a task is completed, you, the accreditation manager, can check those off. Now, because they are in that role, your auxiliary member could also mark that off as complete. You might want to have a discussion internally about who it is that's marking it off as being satisfied, so that you know it won't get deleted or checked off when in actuality maybe the task hasn't truly been completed as of yet. Okay. So different options there in terms of tasks for you to think about. Now, I've created a few of those tasks in the system. I actually am going to use this point now to log out and log in as my recruitment manager. So that individual is supervisor 2 in my system. And so I want to show you what it looks like for them in their view now that we've added them in with that assignment. So this is the recruitment manager logging into their site, and notice that they are a little bit different in terms of the user and the system. Because I've given them access to the assessment, they do see the assessment wording over to the left side. If they click on assessment, it'll show the naming, of course, of our assessment that's currently in place. But notice that when they expand on that, they only have Chapter 31. They also only see it here in the center section. So whichever way they choose to navigate, you'll notice that they only have the chapters, subchapters, and standards that we've assigned them to. So it does keep them restricted from seeing other content in your assessment. Also, you'll notice up here at the top, they only receive the task that they've been assigned. Even though I had multiple other tasks in my inbox as accreditation manager, they are only going to see the task that I've created that's specifically for them in the role of auxiliary. So keep in mind that this is the way to get it to an individual in your organization, to notify them that they have something to do. If you choose to utilize this option, then when they hover over that in their inbox, they could see what it is that they need, and they can begin working on that. If they click on task or click on the standard, it's going to take them directly to that standard you want them to work on. And as I mentioned, this is just an option if you choose to allow them to have access to navigate within the assessment. Now let's assume that this particular individual did in fact want to load some documentation for you. Let's talk about attachments. So from your attachments tab in your right column, you would select add new attachment, and there's various types of attachments that are available that individuals can upload. An upload file would be anything from your desktop, from photos, PowerPoint documentation, Word, Excel, PDF, any types of documents like that, even audio clips. PowerDMS documents are those that come from within PowerDMS that have been loaded into the documents file folders within your site. A simple note would be a note that you utilize for the file that could make a notation for your assessors. And then also there is new rich text attachments, which has to do with hyperlinks and external videos. So we're going to go through each of these. In this example, I'm going to upload a file. And in doing so, I'm going to select a file folder that I've already have in place and some snippets. Now, I want to show you that if this was your recruitment manager, they could do a couple different things. One, they could pull in something from outside that they've already accessed or saved. So let's say that they want to pull in that job posting that you just asked them for. So I'm going to select that option and open. And keep in mind that just because you allow individuals to participate in your site doesn't mean that you have to train them on how to label or highlight. You as the accreditation manager might decide that you want to reserve that right to be able to keep that, you or your team perhaps, to be able to manage that for consistency purposes. That's okay. So it may be that they load it exactly the way they've got it saved on their desktop, and perhaps they really don't know how to be able to attach it to any particular bullet point. The only thing they need to do is attach it somewhere. So let's say that they just click on that top check mark and they select save. As soon as they load that attachment, then that attachment appears in the bottom half of the screen. And they might think, well, that's pretty good. Now, in looking back through the standard, they might also, even though you didn't ask them in the task to load a job posting, they might also notice that there's something related to, advertising through electronic print or other sources. And they might say, well, I've got our website. Our website actually demonstrates that we are advertising through electronic means, so maybe I want to attach that. Well, that would be considered a new rich text attachment. And when you select new rich text, nothing's going to appear here. It's waiting for you to label it. So let's just say that I wanted to put in that this is Newcastle PD, and just so you know, all of these are examples of agencies that are accredited through CALIA that I've just randomly selected from their policies that have been provided in our content hub. So I'm going to say this is Newcastle PD and it's their website, okay? Once again, I can check the box and click save. Now notice what happens is it opens up a field down at the bottom of the page that wants me to add in additional content. So at this point, what's helpful is if you already have your web page already pulled up, which I do, and I'm going to share a different screen with you now so that you can see. So right up here at the top, close this out. You should be able to see now that I'm on Newcastle PD's webpage. And up at the top, they have a police careers page. So if I wanted to click on that, it's going to take me to a different screen that will allow me to see information about their application process. If I scroll down even further at the bottom of the page, there's other links to be able to see. If I wanted to find anything about this police careers, maybe to apply, I could select that option, and it's going to take me to a page where, of course, I can click on Join NCCPD. Once again, if I select that, it takes me to a page where there's listings for all the workers in Newcastle. If I scroll down, I'll see that police officer is one of those. Now, there's a couple different things I could do. I could link my assessment team to be able to review this page. For example, when my CSMs, my compliance service members, are looking at my files, I could direct them here. However, since police officers a little bit further down the page, and it may be that there's not a police officer position posted at the time my CSM is looking at this page, I might decide I want to take a snippet of this page instead and load that. That would be considered an attached file. If I want it to go a step further though, and here's the actual job posting for this, which provides all the job description and benefits, I could actually print this off and save it as well, and have that loaded in, which is what I did earlier, is I actually printed off that job posting and loaded that. What if I wanted to bring them to my just general recruitment page? Well, what I could do is I could actually go back and say, well, I'm just going to provide snippets of those other options. What I want them to do is see that this is the careers page, and I just want to link my CSM to be able to see this when they review this file. If that's the case, you could actually copy your URL address up here at the top, Control-C, or right-click and copy, go back into your assessment. Down here at the bottom of the page, you could type in this area, click on the following link, and put in maybe Newcastle. In fact, let me just put NCC PD and put careers page. I can also highlight that section and click on my hyperlink manager. This allows me a place to be able to put in that URL address I copied. I overwrite HTTP, paste it in. The other thing I want to make sure to do is change my target here to a new window. This will allow my CSM to click on this link, and it actually opens it up in a separate tab instead of having to navigate away from my assessment. Then I can click OK, and my web link has been created, my hyperlink there. Now I still need to go over here to the side. If I hadn't already labeled it, I would do so, and I would select save, and that would lock it down. So once it has been included, then I have the capability to, as a particular member, like I'm the recruitment manager in this case, I could go and actually change my status on this file. Notice I can only operate as an auxiliary. I can't operate as the manager, but I could say, I think I'm in compliance now, that I've loaded what you need me to be able to provide you with, and select save. I could also go to the task and I could check it off. Now, once again, you may want to have a discussion with any auxiliary or team members about who should check off this task, because you might want to ensure as the accreditation manager that you're the one that makes sure that that requirement has been met before it's been satisfied. Okay. So I'm just going to log out as this individual, and I'm going to log back in as my accreditation manager. And I want to be able to show you what it looks like for you when you log in, as to how you would know that you had something pending for you in that site to be able to review. When you log in and you go to your assessment, and you're on your main assessment page, one of the things you can do is go to attachments. And under your attachments, you have the ability to run attachments by date range. For example, if I'm looking for anything that's been added since last Monday, you could put in that date and run a report. Obviously, these are the only two things that are in your site right now, but the fact of the matter is I can see that they've been loaded and who they've been loaded by. And even if, you know, down the line, the manager decides that they're going to maintain this content, it's still going to always give credit to the person who it is that loaded this content in the site. So you're always going to know who that responsible party is. I could click on this view option. It'll take me directly into that assessment standard. And I could look at these two attachments that have been provided by my recruitment manager. Now notice out here to the side, I have an arrow bar. That arrow bar will only appear if I too, as the manager, have participate rights as an auxiliary, okay? If you did not put yourself in the participate role for that auxiliary role, you will not see this arrow and you would not be able to go in and edit this attachment. This is where you as the manager can now go in and specify that this is a proof, and maybe it's a proof for 2020. And you can, of course, relabel it if you need it to, but you also can take control over this proof, meaning that you've looked at it, you've reviewed it, you believe it's something you want to keep in the Accreditation Manager's final file, and select save. You could also, before you do that, you could change any of your check boxes. If this posting, for example, had elements that met each of these bullet points, you could check those and select save. And once again, you could do the same thing here for the next one as far as editing. Okay, go back in and say this is a proof as well. For 2020, maybe I want to label that it is a video, or a web link, hyperlink. I could put that in. By putting in hyperlink or putting in video, it will help you be able to search all your attachments to make sure you review those to ensure that your link is still correct. And then once again, change this to the Accreditation Manager role once you've indicated. And in this case, we are using that hyperlink to prove that we're advertising through electronic print. We could also put here a B in front of it to indicate that it's for bullet B, and click save and lock it down. Okay. Now, we also have the ability for, on a posting such as this is what would allow us to be able to highlight a document, is to edit highlights. If you select edit highlights, then it would allow you to go down and specify, for example, the duties and responsibilities of this job, that appear once things have, if I wanted to highlight this entire section, it is a drag and drop feature. You can move it around on the page, and you can expand it over pages. So once again, if I wanted to move it down and say that, well, it's actually this section, which is my required duties and skills, I could do so. And if that needed to be expanded, I can continue to drag and move this around. Now, you will be provided an area over to the right side that will allow you to label this. For example, if I wanted to put that this was for bullet A, I could do so. If I wanted to be more specific and put duties and responsibilities, I could do that as well. So each agency is going to be a little bit different as far as what they actually want to title that as. So please make sure that you know that it's good to actually label it with something, either the bullet name or a short synopsis of what it is, rather than just leaving highlight 1, highlight 2, highlight 3. And then click save on your highlights. Now keep in mind, you can move your highlights around. You can make as many highlights as you want to. You don't need to highlight after each creation of each highlight. So you can always come back and add more. I want to add a couple other attachments in here though as well, so that you can see what they look like. Another type of attachment that you might want to add, and you might want to do this from either the Accreditation Manager or the team role, would be a PowerDMS document. In this case, I'm going to be looking for my policy that I've loaded on the document side of the house. This is in my CALIA folder, conference folder, so I'm going to look for that specifically. I've got a recruitment chapter, and I've got a policy that is going to be applicable. Now, when you pull that over, it's pulling over the actual title of that document as it's loaded in your site. Notice up here at the top, I have documents, I have policy, and then I have a recruitment folder, and under that, my policy is already labeled. And it pulls it over exactly as it appears in my site. From there, I can specify where this policy is going to be proving compliance. If this policy has elements that meet A, B, C, and D, I can mark all of those. In my site, you could also mark the standard statement as well. And you could place it in the role that you want that document to appear. If I'm the accreditation manager, chances are I'm going to be placing it in the actual role that I am assuming. Put it in accreditation manager, click save, and now my policy appears. Once again, I can go in and I can highlight various sections of this that meet that criteria. For example, here is how we post. I could put posting locations, and maybe this is for bullet B as well to indicate that where it's being posted. I could check the top and check the box for B, indicating that this highlight is specifically proving this part of the standard. I could scroll down a little bit further and say this is where it's being posted, is on the internet, so electronic print or other sources. I could actually highlight all of that area, whatever the case might be. But you can also copy sections of text and paste them if you want it to. Just make sure that each highlight you do, you need to make sure that the highlight's associated with the correct bullet point. And then you could move on and add in additional highlights as you saw fit. So for example, under page 5 here, I've got the rest of the fact that these job announcements will also include the duties and responsibilities. Notice that I can cross various pages and continue to scroll down and add in all the content. This is for bullet A, and this is, once again, duties and responsibilities. And I could check off that it applies to bullet A. Notice I went out of order. I can still rearrange these by hovering over the dot and moving them where they need to go. Okay. Once I've added in all of my highlights rather, and click save, it will lock it down. Now I also, if I want my written directive to appear here, one of the things we do encourage as a best practice, and it will show up in the CALIA's best practice guide, is for you to label your written directives with WD so that you can search through your attachments once again and find them easily. Now you can choose to label them written directive 1, written directive 2 if you've got more than one policy, or you have perhaps a policy and a statute or a general order. But making sure that you use that WD will be helpful when it comes to copying over your attachments, as we'll talk about in course 3. So I'm going to now lock that down. I'm also going to reorder. If I want my written directives to appear at the top, notice that there's 3 dots that appear to the left side. It will allow me to move my written directives up to the top and resort all the other attachments that appear. Okay. Last but not least is there's also another, well, there's a couple more. There's another new rich text attachment that I wanted to show you how to be able to add in as well. This would be, instead of a hyperlink, it would be a video. So you might have noticed that Newcastle also had a video that they had associated with their particular recruitment efforts. And so if I clicked on this join NCCPD again, and I got to that police page that we saw earlier and clicked on down below their video, you might notice that I could go to YouTube and specifically pull up the video that's associated with their site. Now, if I wanted to add in this video, there is an option down at the bottom from YouTube that would allow you to click share. And it provides an embed option that would provide you with a code that you could copy, your embed code. Going back to my assessment, in this case, I would still select new rich text. I would select the option that I want to be able to attach it to. So let's say we're showing our job recruitment announcements through electronic means. I could label this as a video. So once again, I'm going to put that it's a proof for 2020, and I'm going to say that it's a video for recruitment. After I've selected that and I've put it in, since I'm loading it as the accreditation manager, I could select save. It's going to once again bring me up to a workspace down at the bottom. This time, however, I want to select this HTML option, and when I do, there's a sample embed code that's provided there. What we're going to do is overwrite that with the embed code we just copied. And if you've done that correctly, you could click preview and it should show your video populates in the screen for you there. So then you would just need to click save and lock that down. All right. So now we've got a video in there as well. Last but not least is you have the ability to add in that simple note. And a simple note is important if you're wanting to communicate with your CSM or assessors about something in this file that's notable, such as you could indicate that note for 2020, we did not hire any new officers. Or maybe in this case, we did not hire any civilian positions, is probably more realistic during this accreditation year. Okay. So once you've actually labeled that, you could associate that once again to the root or to some appropriate bullet point and click save. But just so you know what a simple note looks like, it looks kind of like a post-it note that you could make that note available so that your assessors could see and understand why there's no additional documentation provided on a particular topic within your standard. Okay. So that's the various types of attachments and the highlighting that you can utilize. The last thing that you will want to do is make sure that before you leave this, you would want to change your status. As I mentioned, we already talked about updating statuses in bulk. This is where you could go back as the accreditation manager, and if you've reviewed everything that was provided by the auxiliary or your team member, and you looked and added in any additional documentation, you could move it to in compliance and put that it was in compliance. Notice it pre-populated for me till the first day of year 2. That will then lock it down and ensure that this file has been changed and reflects that status until that next year begins. All right. Finally, what if this policy that's attached to your standard actually were to change? Well, if I were to go back to that particular document that we had earlier, I do have a draft copy of this document behind the scenes. Now, you may not, as an accreditation manager, you may not be the one that's actually modifying your policy in your agency. In some cases you are, in other cases you're not. Notice that this draft version, if I were to select it and say that it is now ready to be released and published, and I sent it out and published it regardless of whether you are the person that publishes new policies or not, as soon as it's been published, there's a couple things that happen. One is on the document page, if it's been attached to a standard in your assessment, it will reflect that standard down at the bottom of the page. So someone looking at that particular policy would see that they could click on it and make sure that that standard is attached. Also, you'll now see that while I'm in the assessment, it has been flagged. And because it's been flagged, that's an indication to the accreditation manager that there is a newer version of this policy that is available. To update that attachment, what you would do is hover over that flag, select it, and it's going to give you the option to keep your highlights. You'll always want to do that because that prevents you from having to reinvent the wheel each time. I would say I understand and want to upgrade. When I do so, it replaces the one policy with the new one. It gives me the option to double check where my highlights are to ensure things haven't shifted, such as this. So if it did, I could move things around on my page to ensure that these appear where they need to be. Some might be in the exact same place. Others might need to be moved briefly, and you have the ability to adjust that. But as soon as you've verified those, you would select save, and now your new policy has been updated and is reflected in your standard. Okay. So I believe that that's all of the things that we were going to cover in this particular course. We are going to pick up once again with following up in our course 3 with some additional tools and tasks. We hope that you'll come back and ask questions. And of course, during this session, you can ask questions throughout. But also, if you have any questions that you want to send to me, you can certainly do that to us as well. And then last but not least, we just once again appreciate that you have joined us today, and hopefully it's been helpful for you in being able to have a better understanding of how to utilize your PowerDMS application. We look forward to seeing you in session number 3, which is finalizing your accreditation. Thank you.